Evening, members. Welcome to the second part of the Economic Planning and Housing Committee. First off on the agenda is apologies and replacements. So I got Councillor McAtee was replaced by Councillor Miners Bound, and Councillor Ibrahim replaced by Councillor Jones, Councillor Ashfield replaced by Councillor Fillimore, and Councillor Godison is replaced by Councillor Kay Watts. Hello, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know whether Councillor Hussey was back from holiday or not, but he wouldn't have known about this meeting because I believe he went before we rearranged the meeting. My two reserves, one is on holiday and the other is debarred because spoke at open forum, so I am the only representative.
Okay, we'll stick down Councillor Hussey's apologies then. So we've got the fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There is no fire alarm scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through the reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast. And microphones, please, can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and those on the webcast, that you speak directly into the microphone. The microphone stem can be moved so it can be closer to your mouth as possible, it said. And please switch your mobiles to silent modes or off. So that's the admin done. So we dealt with all the substantial items apart from Appendix 2 at the last meeting. So we're going to crack on in Appendix 2, draft site allocations, policies and concept plans. And that was on page 115. So the way I'm going to play this is site by site. So if members want to answer questions and have a debate on each site, we can go through them and then we move on to the next one. So the first one is on Southern Manydown on page 1 of the appendices 2. So I don't know if anybody wants to start off.
Thank you very much, Gary. A couple of questions, and I think some of them might be in the detail. I'll start with the detail one first. It talks about a hospital or campus. I'm just conscious that in some of the conversations that have happened with the hospital, the campus definition has been variable or been sort of construed to mean different things by different people. One of the things that I thought was absolute and I thought was an ambition of this council was to have a science park, which I believe comes outside the definition of a campus. And it doesn't talk about the science park and having that high-tech life science employment as a usage around Junction 7. And I just wondered why that was.
You're right. I mean, it's an issue of detail that we will address as we go through the process. So this kind of reflects the position where we are at the moment and the conversations that we have ongoing with the Hospital Trust. They're quite happy at the moment with the term health campus. What that actually looks like in reality and how that incorporates or does in a science park will be to be discussed and determined. That's why we've gone for quite a broad allocation there to encompass all of those different uses to make sure that's still on the table. So those conversations will go on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gary. My second point on this site was actually I'm conscious that our policy will talk about, again, an aspiration which will be about making sure the site is landscape led, with it being so close to villages like North Waltham. I just wondered what conversation there'd been about the whole concept of Hospital 2.0, as far as lots of it being sort of modular by design, designed by the centre, which is all of the messages that are coming out of Westminster. And just conscious, I think stakeholders were shown at one point a very pretty picture of the external appearance of a hospital, which sort of turned into a hillock, which was great from North Waltham. But it sounds like Hospital 2.0 doesn't quite achieve those aesthetics.
Again, those are sort of ongoing conversations, really, as the Hospital Trust works out what it would actually look like in practice. We are doing further work in terms of landscape assessment of the site in general, and particularly around in that area, which will look at different scenarios, things. So that's sort of ongoing work at the moment.
Just one more as well, because I am very confused by this. I'm sure many members will be aware that the constituency MP for Basingstoke had a community chat about the local plan update on Tuesday, which Councillor Gavin James attended as the co-leader of the administration. And he said categorically that this administration would not allocate any more space for B8 warehousing. And not only does it appear on this site, but it appears on many other sites in this document. And it may be a question that we just need to park until the portfolio holder arrives. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, that's the that's the Oakdown Farm one. So
it talks about B8 in Many down south as well.
Yeah.
And Popham.
Right. Well, that's a comment that you've made, and that would be noted. So it's up to the portfolio holder to come back with their when they go out to section 18, Reg 18.
Will he be attending this evening? So that, because I think it was so categoric on Tuesday, the fact that we have in public documents that at least 3 sites have significant allocation drafted for B8 warehousing, logistics and distribution. It's something that, you know, thinking about that the Dummer parish councillors were there on Tuesday, everybody at that side of town was delighted to hear what the administration said and completely supported it and asked for a lot of clarification, and that is not what we have in front of us this evening.
Yep, thank you. I mean, that was expressed at the members' working party last week, wasn't it? When we were looking at the Oakdown and the sites that we already have in the town, and do we actually need new warehouses on the edge of town? And a lot of that was driven by government, if I recall correctly. Yes.
It's not for me to comment on what the administration will say, and that's obviously a question for the portfolio holder when he arrives, because he's just been delayed. He will be coming, I understand. I don't know what was said at that meeting either, but yes, you're right. And just in terms of the actual allocations, there is a logistics kind of requirement on each of those that you mentioned, and that's in line with the economic needs assessment work that we've done with the evidence base shows that there is a need, and it is the plan's role to show where that will be located.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, Gary. If I can pick up on Councillor Millis-Bound's point, we asked at the cross-party forum for a needs assessment on warehousing because of the 2 sites that are coming on stream now. Priestley Road is a huge development on the former Eli Lilly site, and we have no idea what that will produce in terms of delivery. So I think it is important that we get a more up-to-date assessment on warehousing within the borough, and I know you've done it through the needs assessment, but I think it's a changing situation, so perhaps the work that we did in the cross-party forum can reiterate that. But another couple of things on page 117, if I may. I see that we have looked at service plots for custom and self-build. Have we looked at Cherwell Borough Council? They have a custom and self-built area within their borough, and the point about making sure that's right within these sites is that custom built or certainly self-built take a long time to deliver, and therefore people are living within a building site for much longer because naturally people want to do it themselves. They want to have the right design. Some people want to just build them at the weekends. And that means that other people who have bought other parts of that development are sitting in a building site for years and years and years. And that is evident in Cherwell. And I would ask you to see if there should not be solely self-build areas, either within the site, so they're not interspersed within the build out, because it does make it look like a building site for an extended period of time, or that we have an area just for self-build, perhaps in South Mannydown, for them, or another site within North Manydown, because I think people don't want to. They want to build their own house, but they want to make sure that the house next door to them is actually completed and gives an aesthetic look too. So can I ask you to, or ask the administration to look to that point rather than intersperse 5% with all these big sites, because that is a big number on 7,500, and it depends where you put them will affect it for many years to come. And if I could also say, one of my favourite subjects is Gypsy and Traveller pitches, as many of the officers know. I don't like CN5 where we disperse the Gypsy and Traveller pitches in 1s and 2s. I think it is important on our own sites, and this is South Manydown, so it is our own site, if we deliver on that site because we can choose where they are. And as we've done in North Manydown, where there is 5 proposed, I think that is quite important. But I do also want to highlight it now that I do not believe, A, the travelling community, B, the settled community who will live next door to these pitches, or the developers like the idea of CN5 and the scattergun approach of Gypsy and Traveller pitches in each of these big developments. So I would be looking at somewhere as we walk through the papers tonight for perhaps a little bit of flexibility where developers, not on this site, because as I've said, I think we should be a flagship for delivery of Gypsy and Traveller pitches, but on other sites where we could get a financial recompense and a site purchased by us, for the Gypsy and Traveller community could build out perhaps 10 Traveller pitches. That would be a great step in my view to showing that we really care about the Traveller pitch and listen to their concerns about not wanting to be in 1s and 2s on pitches and rather be a extended family on a single pitch. So that these are some of the thoughts that I've got on the South Manydown and page 3, but there's plenty more to come.
That be noted, though, those comments, yeah. Simon?
I just wanted to add on custom and self-build. Rooksdown and Sherburn St John Ward had the national pilot for Homes England for custom and self-build with Squirrel Wood, and I would summarise it as a significant disaster. They no longer talk about it as the national pilot, and I don't know whether it's something about the way that the planning system works where they all needed to be passported, which means in some respects I think some of the thoughts of watching grand designs that we all have is very different from the reality where actually it's building the same model of a house that the builder would have built, but building it yourself with a passport that's been approved through the Development Control Committee. But I'm just conscious of 120 units, 12 of them were supposed to be self-build, that was reduced to 6. To Ken's point, interestingly, I think they were completed before the rest of the development, unusually. And the custom build part ended up being completely truncated because of lots of other central government policies making custom build almost impossible to deliver. Custom build was about, for Squirrel Wood, whether you had a single story extension with a wonderful glass ceiling for your kitchen diner. Well, actually, with that level of flexibility, it isn't eligible for right to buy. So they had to then fix all of the external walls, which meant you could just move the internal walls about and change the layout of every floor within it. And for me, there's something about really understanding and getting behind the detail of our custom and self-build register and finding out whether these policies really deliver what residents want who are on that register.
Thank you. I'm sure that'll be noted going forward. Is there any more on Southern Manydown, I should say? Yep, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on Section 5 of the provision for warehousing. I've just looked online and there's over 500 vacancies for warehouse jobs, so I don't think we need much more warehousing, especially in this area. And I think we need to focus more on high-paid, high-skilled jobs and focus more on a science park.
Ken?
If I could just add to some of the points to be noted, we need to make South Manidown a way into the countryside. Although it is currently in the countryside, there's obviously a motorway sitting adjacent to it, and we need to make sure that the tracks, or however we could link into the wider countryside, are laid down really strongly, so as there is no question that that infrastructure work is not done early, so as people who move in to the site as the first residents still get the benefit of the countryside, even though the cost of it may be back end on the houses. So I'm really keen to make sure that there is a proper link between South Manidown and the wider countryside. It's obviously okay. It's a given in North Manidown because you've got the country park there, but I do think there is something that we need to make sure that the green linkages are in place, either through our own efforts, because obviously it is our money and it is our land, that we do some of that infrastructure work early. And I think it is really important. We've got an opportunity here, as we haven't yet decided who the master planners are, to get that in writing, get it done for ourselves, and make sure that the viability of it is not affected by what we want to see in terms of our greenness to the new residents. And it will be very important if we've obviously got a hospital, science campus, or whatever comes around there, if we can show it's a modeler for the future. And I do think this is our opportunity to do the ask. If we do it to ourselves, then we can hold ourselves to account and say to others, well, we did it, you should too. And I think it is absolutely vital that we make sure that the linkages are all in there, the green infrastructure is in there, and that we see this as an opportunity to do much more on our climate change goals, but also our health and well-being goals as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have no more on Southern Manidown. We'll go on to the next one, Popham Garden Village. It's on page 127. Anyone? Sorry.
I just, this is a new settlement. Let's be honest about it. And when we think about new settlements, we need to think of a higher role, what we would want, what is the ideal. 3,000 homes on a possibly brownfield site are fantastic, and I think it's necessary. But there's nothing in this that really talks about a relationship with Winchester, and I think we do need to have a proper relationship with Winchester if we're to bring out Popham Garden Village. I am told that it might be difficult to deliver. Not all of the landowners are on the same page. So therefore we would, like many times with North Manidown, we've not quite got it right. And these are big numbers now. We're starting to talk about the big numbers. The reality is that we haven't seen anything from the administration to tell us what the plan B is. If they can't deliver some of these big sites, this one, east of Basingstoke, Lodge Farm, where is the second list of sites? Because frankly, I'm not convinced that all of these sites within these papers are deliverable. So I would hope that Andy's got underneath that piece of paper he's brought back from the train, he's got the second list of housing that can be delivered, because the last thing we want to do is get this to Reg 18 and find out we cannot deliver it, because it will be, the inspector will feel that it's as bad a state as previously. Our undelivery of large sites has been really poor. I mean, Manidown, and I take some of that responsibility because I was leader. There is no doubt that we need to think about where the backstop is. And when we start getting into places like Popham, there are big numbers. So I just bring that to mind because we do need to, as a council and as a committee, understand what happens if we kick out any of the big sites tonight. And I think it would be, now Andy's back from his train trip, that he explains what Plan B is, and how we as a committee and as a council, because remember we all vote on this, how we can be sure that the plan will be substantive enough to go through the inspection. So that question first.
Andy, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for everyone for turning up late. It was sadly just a commute from work rather than a pleasure trip on the trains, but nonetheless, I apologise. It's an absolutely valid question that you've asked, Ken. Obviously, the process of getting here has been quite a long one. It's taken us several years to get to this shortlist, and this is a shortlist. And as I mentioned in my introduction at the time, this is the shortlist that was put forward to EPH this time last year by the previous administration, and we've used that as our starting point for tonight. There is obviously, as well as this shortlist, there is a long list of other sites that for various reasons weren't considered good enough to make it onto this shortlist. If necessary, for whatever reason, as a result of discussions tonight, as a result of comments by the inspector or residents or anybody else involved in the process going forward, if any of these sites have to come out, then we do have some other sites that we will potentially need to look at. But at the moment, based on where we are, these are the sites that have been shortlisted. But there are more if needed. So if any of these fall through, there is a list that we can refer to rather than we're not going to be completely stuck with a big hole in our plan.
Thank you for that confirmation. I am grateful. And like a manager, I'm sure, of a football team, that you have substitutes to put on the park. But it is really important because we don't want to be hamstrung tonight. So as we can honestly say, actually, I really don't like that, let's kick it out, rather than feel that we're straitjacketed into these numbers or these sites. And I think it is important that we do that sieve to make sure that you and us are protected going forward. So it is genuinely meant to get the best plan possible going forward. And you know, we when it's a new site, it is difficult to deliver. We've seen that with North Manidown. There are always land issues, there are price issues, there are access and infrastructure issues. So this all looks great on paper, but it looks very difficult to deliver a huge number like 3,000 on a site that is more isolated than some of the sites that we're going to look at tonight.
Sorry,
Just very quickly, Chair, if I may, absolutely agree. Yes, that there are challenges in terms of delivering the bigger sites, as we all know. I think it's part of the reason as well why we are looking at our steps trajectory approach, because it would mean that sites such as Popham Garden Village wouldn't come forward in the first 5 years of the plan. They would take a bit more time to deliver. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, doing some of these other sites, if we look at them, particularly some of the smaller sites that are already integrated within the town centre, for example, are going to be much easier to deliver than the large ones.
Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to remind the people opposite that, in fact, this paper was one prepared last June, when obviously this was your paper from your administration. So obviously a lot of this information was things that you had thought about and things that you put forward. And I certainly think that the example of Manidown North, having bought the land in '96, we have taken such a long time to get there. And I don't think that was because of the lack of will for the people who bought it at the time, but because of other reasons that it didn't actually come forward. I believe that this administration is going to move forward as quickly as possible to deliver the lands that we are going to allocate this evening, or try to recommend what we don't allocate this evening, and that the administration do have the list, and the same officers will be working on this as worked on it last year. I'm absolutely sure and convinced that they have got some backing behind it. I would like to raise that I'm quite interested to see that, in fact, for once, it actually does mention specialist accommodation for older people in the first box, which, again, is something I do think that we are perhaps not thinking about so much, because if we can release larger 3-bedroomed homes or 4-bedroomed homes that families are currently living in, and possibly are now reduced, children leave home, one partner dies, and women or men are living on their own in a big house, and there isn't anywhere where they can go to retire. So we need to start thinking more holistically about what we deliver and what the needs of our people are. The distribution of ages, obviously the census has just come out and the information is there. We know that the population is getting older, but also that we've got a lot of young families, and some of whom haven't actually got children at the moment, because people are putting it off, I think, because they can't afford it. So I think we do need to look very carefully about what we're building. And I also welcome the fact that we're talking about allocating land for a solar farm, which again is something that I think we in the administration have been talking about during the policies and making sure that we do allocate land for green spaces. So I think if we have an opportunity, as Councillor Rattigan quite rightly says, to develop a site properly with the proper infrastructure, that we deliver it in a reasonable way, and that we make sure that what we're delivering there has all the facilities that people need over the years, and that while it might be stepped, it may not be something first, that we have got an ambition to deliver homes for people that people need. Right homes in the right place, as many of us have been saying for many years. I think this would be interesting to move forward, and I hope that it remains within the plan.
Thank you, Joe. Tony?
Yeah, it's a question. It says you want to be talking or working with Winchester. The reason I raise this is because when I first got elected back in day dot, we was talking about Micheldever, which went on for 10, 15, 20 years, I think, before they chucked it out. I just wondered, are they talking about Micheldever again in Winchester? Will we be up against protests and things like that? Most probably will be, but have we thought about getting the thing through? Because I think it seems a good site to have. It's a little bit out, but some people like living out. But I do wonder what you talk to Winchester for, because they've already rejected it on the other side of the road.
Come back, Joe.
Just to say that we do have relatively regular meetings with Winchester, as we do with all our neighbouring authorities, through the duty to cooperate, and we have to look at issues that are cross-boundary. So this potentially is one, and it's one that is an allocation that Winchester would be interested in for obvious reasons. So we will continue to have those conversations. In terms of Micheldever, as far as I'm aware, Winchester aren't looking at that at the moment as a potential area for development. That's where they are with their local plan, but they're going through their local plan process as well currently. So these are conversations we'll continue to have.
Thank you for that. Colin?
Yes, cheers, Gary. Throughout the piece, and not necessarily just specific to Popham Garden Village, I'm really concerned about water quality and water supply, and where we're going with this in terms of how the government have backtracked on some of the stuff. And 3,000 houses draining into the River Test catchment area, I think, is something we have to be really careful with, and when planning constraints are, when it says we need to achieve on-site mitigation measures and all this sort of stuff, it is utterly important that this is all adhered to.
Thank you. I don't know if any officers want to make any comments on that. I was just noted. Yeah. Ken?
Thank you. Just just for your knowledge, I believe there is now a legal challenge going in against the Cala site at Winchester, which is quite an extensive site, because of the phasing and because some of the landowners want more money. To Joe's point about accommodation for older people, I would like something in the policies or stipulated in this new garden village that we have lifetime homes, homes that people can stay in from the starting a family through their children's education to working at home to retiring there. So as they are flexible enough in their build, so as you can have a downstairs toilet and shower room. Those we need to start building not just houses. This paper seems great about building houses, but start building communities, because that is what is going to make Basingstoke and Dean the place we all want it to be. We need stickability when people buy a house, so as they know their neighbours, they can trust them to look after their children. They can go around and get a cup of sugar. They can do the things that they would expect. And in the big cities of the past, we've seen that. And Councillor Jones was making that point about Southam earlier. People moved there and stayed there. We do need to make, in our housing policy, in our delivery of place, to make sure that we build communities. We don't want people moving on in 3 years' time. We want them to be there in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time. And I'm very fortunate. I've lived in the same place for 21 years. There are, in a small community of 14 houses, 7 of them have not moved since they were built. That is what you need to build into these new things, that lifetime homes. So, let's all build a home, but let's build a community more importantly.
Thank you. I'm sure the administration will take that on board. Thank you. If there's no more comments or statements on Popham Garden Village, we move on to the next one. Page 135, east of Basingstoke and Lodge Farm. Kate?
Hello. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that I think I may have said this last time at our previous meetings. The spatial strategy needs to be informed by the local nature recovery network and by biodiversity opportunities. A number of concerns about this site were raised by our residents and ward members, including the proximity of the sewage works and incinerator with dreadful noise and odour problems, archaeology and heritage, landscape impact, biodiversity loss, highways and access, but I won't repeat all of them here. During the last local plan, there was a strong recommendation from the EA that the site be removed, and this is on the basis that the sequential test this site has was one of the worst schools in the borough. In addition, we now know that we need to consider our chalk streams as part of a catchment-based approach and incorporate natural capital assessments. If we're to improve biodiversity, which the Environment Act mandates, then we need to look at our river catchments from a wider perspective. So we all know our chalk streams are internationally rare, are highly valued by residents, and provide opportunities for health and well-being as well as ecological restoration. The majority of the sites we're looking at considering will drain into the Loddon either through surfaced water or sewage treatment. Therefore, particular caution needs to be exercised for those sites adjacent to the river. The catchment-based approach recommends development rules for chalk streams, and I've pulled out just 3 of them here. Chalk stream no development buffer zones to protect chalk stream riparian corridors from encroaching development. Chalk streams and their associated habitats should feature strongly in local nature recovery strategies and biodiversity net gain, and SUDs on all new large-scale developments in chalk catchments. On this particular site, SUDs are shown to be geologically entirely unsuitable for almost all of the land on the east of Basingstoke sites. You'll have heard me say before, the health of the headwaters of a chalk stream have a disproportionate effect downstream. For example, sediment carried into headwaters will have a far worse impact, and so too does pollution, owing to the low volumes and reduced dilution. The government's Environmental Improvement Plan 2023 Goal 3 is taking action to restore our rivers, including globally significant chalk streams, with the goal of improving at least 75% of our waters to be close to their natural state, and to protect our chalk streams by supporting the chalk stream strategy. So even all our government documents are pointing to this. If we build on this precious catchment area, we breach this legislation and the spirit of the Environment Act. The Loddon catchment should be a local nature recovery network. It was allocated as a biodiversity opportunity area and a biodiversity project area many years ago. And in 2012, the EA identified the Loddon as a priority area for habitat enhancement. And page 135 in the vision for SS 3.6 east of Basingstoke and SS 3.7 Lodge Farm, we talk about integrating with beautiful countryside. But that is simply not possible when development is proposed right up to the edge of the floodplain and historic water meadows. The hydrological regime of the River Loddon will certainly be affected by any development on Lodge Farm or east of Basingstoke. Under Design and Landscape on page 136, we talk about retaining a physical and visual separation with Old Basing. Again, this is just not possible. How does a development of 1,500 houses maintain a strategic gap? Finally, notes from our parish council which say a site which has poor or inadequate access would have significant adverse landscape, biodiversity and heritage impacts, and where future residents will suffer odours and potential air pollution is not a sustainable location for 1,500 dwellings, as it would conflict with both the social and environmental components of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to come back on specific questions like on the SUDs or on the buffers or the air quality, or you're just going to note that and take that forward?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think they're good points. I remember from our session 3 weeks ago that this was a site as well that a number of residents came to speak about. So that has been noted.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. There are a few issues on this one. One of the issues that really concerns me is the lack of progress on this site. It was in the last local plan, and during that time it hasn't moved 1 inch forward. It seems that the landowners, and we all know who they are, aren't really that bothered about delivering it. And if that's the situation in the past, or if they want to deliver it, they're unable to deliver it because they haven't got time. And it does worry me that we're going to be in exactly the same situation again there. The other thing I noticed, and it's touching on an area that Kate was going, is the odour zone from the sewage works and from the chimney, the fallout area from the chimney. Looking on the map on there, it's got something written there. It says odour contour, but it doesn't seem to have any symbol next to it or tell me what it is or where it relates to. You've got a chimney there which has particulate outfall. You've got a sewage works there, and there doesn't seem to be any consideration towards those things about the areas that can be delivered. I'm concerned about the traffic on the A33, but I won't go there at the moment. The other one that does worry me considerably is down at the bottom of the map is a nice little blue arrow which says bus only gateway, and that opens out onto Pyatt's Hill. Anybody who knows Pyatt's Hill knows half the time it's difficult to get a car through there. The thought of trying to get a bus through there is just absolute madness. You might as well try and drive it through this room. You stand about as much chance. So that concerns me. And I think Kate's already covered the River Loddon issues. But the biggest thing of all is lack of deliverability. Having seen what's happened over the last 10 to 15 years on that site, which is absolutely nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Anybody want to come back on that deliverability of this site, or clarification on the map?
The only thing I would say, and I'll take your points on board in terms of the landowner, a public exhibition was held in the summer. Yeah, exactly. So those conversations are moving forward. So that is a positive move in terms of, so obviously a lot of this site is already allocated in the adopted local plan. So there's nothing stopping that part of East of Basingstoke site coming forward anyway under the current plan. So we will see how that continues.
Ken?
Thank you. I mean, I would really like to see it struck from the list of sites, frankly. I don't believe it's deliverable, and the fact that we haven't delivered it over a local plan period indicates to me that that is the case. We've got a floodplain, we've got water meadows, and I very much cherish that. I've got one in my own village of Ashford Hill. It has been newsworthy for the last 6 months, 9 months, the state of our rivers. And if we are to hold ourselves as exemplars, we need to protect things like the River Loddon. I think it is beholden upon us to say, actually, do you know, there are bits of our borough that we will not build on, that we can't endanger, because the reality is we just don't know. And if we're fearful of the unknown, then we should say no to the development here. I think it is very important that we have settlement definitions and distinctions. And I'm pretty sure if we build out all of these homes, Old Basing will just become a part of Lodge Farm and East of Basingstoke. And I do think it is important to have strategic apps. The point of having a distinction between one village name and another is because they have their own identity. And if we lose that, I genuinely believe that would not be something I could vote towards. So I would hope that the administration will listen to Councillor Tuck, Councillor Robinson and myself and say, actually, this is one that we should shelve. And I know they've given us a hope that they might deliver it, but actually we've seen it all before. And there is a reason to say, actually, the Loddon is too important to our river network and riverways, that this should be struck from the proposals to move forward. So I would hope that happens.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for that comment. Simon?
Just a very, very detailed one, just to pick up bus gateways. We have one in Rookstown, but in front of the hospital. I sadly spend too much time in high vis holding a clipboard. It doesn't work. They're a complete failure in Hampshire. Any site that relies on them to manage something, it never delivers the promise. And we should never have them as some intrinsic way of managing traffic.
Joe?
Thank you. I'd like to support Councillor Tuck on her comments about the river and what Councillor Rushigan just said. I had the pleasure of going to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight conference a week last Tuesday, and I heard James, the CEO of the River Trust, talk very, very convincingly about the state of our rivers, especially our chalk streams. And he is devoting his life in memory of his wife, who died earlier this year, in trying to protect them. He came along to the Liberal Democrat conference on Saturday, as it happened, and he made a similar speech. And I was very impressed by the argument and the facts and figures about the state of our rivers in this country. As many of you know, I used to work for the Environment Agency, and this has got worse over the years. And really, unless we protect our chalk streams, which many of them are unique to this country, the majority of the chalk streams in the world are actually in Britain, in England. So I do think we ought to be very serious about protecting our chalk streams, and should not allow pollution to go in there. I know the government recently have announced plans about potentially changing some of the rules, and I was, well, disappointed is a small word. I was angry, and so are many other people. And at that conference a week last Tuesday, of all persuasions, people were very angry about the fact that rivers are not being protected. So I certainly think that this site should be one that we look at very, very seriously as to whether or not it is suitable. And as a former EA employee, of course, I would say to you, you should never build on a floodplain, because that is against the suggestion that is made by the Environment Agency and still holds true today.
Thank you, Joe. Have we got any more comments on East of Basingstoke Lodge Farm? So I dare say the portfolio holder would listen to what the committee has said. There's not a lot of approval for this particular application. Thank you. Page 151, west of Upper Cupford Covered Farm. Get that right. Is there any? Have I? Oh dear, I'm terribly sorry. Oh yes. Sorry, that's 146 Sherfield Hill Farm.
Thank you, Chair. You've moved a bit closer to home. Just looking down on page 146, the things that this claims it can achieve. Ensure the development will not have a severe adverse impact on the local highway network. I drive up and down that road regularly, obviously. Coming in tonight, it was bumper to bumper. It is every morning, it is every night. Hampshire County Council said 5 years ago that the A33 would reach capacity by 2023, even without a single house being built there. So how anybody thinks they can put hundreds of houses, 200 or so houses there onto the A33 and not have an unacceptable impact on the highway is absolute madness. It can't be done. Not unless there is a massive, I mean absolutely massive investment in public transport on a much larger scale, the whole public transport situation between Basingstoke and Reading. Demonstrate safe, suitable and convenient access to local facilities. All the local facilities are the other side of the A33. The shop, the church, the sports centre, village halls, everything is the other side of the A33. So the only way people are going to get to those facilities is by car onto, once again, the A33. Bit further down, provide a gap between the site's northern boundary in order to maintain the separate identity of Church End. Well, if you look at the map, you will see that it is absolutely tight against the boundary of Church End. It is literally at the bottom of the gardens of the houses of Church End that are on the A33. So that is totally impossible to deliver. And a bit further down again, or actually on page 147, ensure that safe access will be provided to the highway network from the A33 via Taylor's Farm roundabout, including a suitable controlled crossing. Well, that crossing is already there. We've got it's not a pelican crossing, it's a toucan crossing, I don't know, some animal that I can't remember. And it is in use because you've got the houses on Sherfield Hill, on Redlands. The minute anybody pushes that button and that red light goes red and somebody crosses the road, at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning or 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, the A33 stops. And the traffic, in 1 minute it takes for that light to go green again, the traffic is stationary southbound all the way back past Sherfield School, right up to the roundabout in Sherfield on Loddon, and going the other way, virtually back to the traffic lights in Chinham. The whole thing in traffic terms is absolute madness. But with all that being said, it was a reserve site in our last local plan. How anybody can deliver it, the things that this needs to deliver, I don't know, it's beyond me.
Thank you for those comments. They're going to be noted. Tony?
Is there any plans for the A33? I know it's a government, what they call it, it's a government thing, because years ago they were going to dual it at one time. I just wonder whether there is any plans we know of, or to actually dual part of the A33, because you're talking about peak times. I sometimes go up there in the daytime and it's you try crossing that going to the golf club up there and it's pretty dangerous, especially when I'm driving.
There's nothing in terms of the dualling position, so no, although Hampshire County Council are doing work on the main corridors, which includes A33, looking at numerous aspects of it, from sort of bus provision, MRT, those sorts of things. So it's very much on their radar, that route, and they are looking at it, but there's nothing in plan at the moment.
Thank you. Ken?
On Nick's point on page 33 point P, yes, I mean, controlled crossing on a very fast road is just frankly dangerous. So would there be an ask, if we were to go with this, that we have a across the top bridge? Because frankly, we need to, if this is to come on board, we need to make sure that the safety of the residents on both sides of the road are protected. But I just, the infrastructure ask needs to be big on this. And I was genuinely in favour of this as an early delivery site when I was leader. So I've no, the principle seems okay, but in practice, what can we do to make it a better site that could deliver homes if they were to come about?
Nick?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points I missed. One, again, something we've already touched on, and I'll only mention it, won't waste everybody's time. We're back into the River Loddon area. Everything that happens on this site will end up in the River Loddon. And the other thing is, if you look at this site and you look at the one land east of Basingstoke site at the same, look at the two together, you've gone from Chinham to land east of Basingstoke to the Redlands site, which is being built now, and then to Sherfield Hill Farm. You have extended the urban area of Basingstoke to Church End, and Church End will cease to be a village. Church End will be the new Chinham. Chinham isn't really a village anymore. Chinham is now part of Basingstoke. It will be Church End that's part of Basingstoke. So you are literally urbanising the whole length of the A33, and you are getting incredibly close to Sherfield, which obviously is where I live, and it's special to me. Other places are special to other people because that's where they live. But it's just totally eroding the rural area of the whole of the Loddon Valley. You look at the whole lot. If one of these sites goes ahead, it will be a pity. If they both go ahead, it will be a tragedy.
Thank you for those comments. Ken, one?
I say it's just on Nick's point. I accept that that this is smaller than Lodge Farm and east of Basingstoke, and therefore, as I've always said, nobody should take everything, but everybody needs to take something to make this all work. And communities will be strengthened knowing what they're going to get, rather than have the possibility of planning by appeal, which causes all of us as councillors major problems.
Thank you. So no more comments or statements on that particular site. So we move on to 1551 west of Upper Cufford Farm. Nick, yeah.
I think this is another one that's been on the cards for a long, long time, and the big issue there, again, the River Loddon. Everything here goes into Bow Brook. Bow Brook flows into the River Loddon, but the biggest issue is infrastructure. Last year, 58 children left Bramley School. I don't know how many left the four-lane school in Chinham. 58 children should have gone to their catchment area school, which is the Hurst community, not the Hurst, the community college on Popley. 3 got in, Everest, thank you, Ken. 3 got places, that's all they had. The rest of them are at schools spread around Basingstoke. A lot of them go up to the Hurst in Tadley because it's got spare capacity. Others are faced with a train journey or a bus journey into Basingstoke, changing in Basingstoke and then getting a bus out to Brighton Hill. That's a big ask for an 11-year-old. There is a total lack of secondary school places in this area. And that, on this particular site, that is my biggest worry. I could vote for this site. I could vote for this site quite happily if somebody said to me, we will build a secondary school before it happens. Not we'll allocate a bit of land, but we will only allow this to be built after a secondary school has been built. Because we need the secondary school now, before any of these sites we've just talked about have been built. The secondary school needs to be built. As I say, to have children going, you're taking 2 modes of transport to get right across Basingstoke, or parents having to pay something like £50 a week to get their kids to school because they're not going to the catchment area school, or taking themselves in the car. Guess what? Down the A33 at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. I can note that, make those comments to the county. Thank you. Any more on? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have concerns with this site as well. I mean, Cufford Lane is a very narrow, practically single track most of the way, and to take your life in your hands the rest of it. So I have serious concerns about the travel arrangements. But also there are some environmental sensitivities. We've got sinks and ancient woodland dotted across this area, and I really hope that we've got enough in this, that we're providing sufficient buffers. I know 20 metres has been put in here, but we know that really needs to be graded and in addition to. So I would have some real concerns on environmental issues there.
Thank you. We've got concerns on the buffer again of the particular site. Any more? Move on then. Thank you. Page 156, land west of Marnell Park. Simon?
Thank you very much, Gary. I couldn't sit here as a councillor for Sherborne, Sir John and Rooksdown without saying, and it's not only this site, but it is many other sites, that, you know, we came up with a stonking idea when we invented strategic gaps. We spent a lot of time talking about how important they are protecting the distinctiveness of villages, and I think it's very, very difficult for all of us when we have site allocations that absolutely are talking about allocating houses in strategic gaps.
Thank you. Ken?
I'd like to reiterate that. Frankly, we, as a DC committee, kicked out a small development in the strategic gap close to Marnell Park, and I frankly think it was a good decision. We need to make sure that that distinctiveness remains within our settlements, and I genuinely believe that this breaches all of the things that we hold dear. I could not support it and do not support it.
Thank you.
Just building on that, Gary, if I may, how unusual is it that the DC actually refuses an application on a site like this, and the inspector agreed with DC on that occasion? So I think it would be horrific for us to sit here and go, somehow we've all changed our minds.
Thank you. So I'm sure that's going to be noted, building on strategic gaps in our past records being thrown out. Going forward, we need to get it right. So any more comments on that? Thank you. We move on to the next one. Page 161, Waybrook Park Golf Course. I'm
tempted just to say ditto, but I won't. There is also just something, isn't there, for me, and I forget which paragraph it was. I want to say 30, Joe, you'll correct me, where it started talking about looking at 30 years and planning for the future and all of those things. And I just think when we come up with sites like this that do end up sort of creeping into strategic gaps and I know it's a golf course, but actually there is something about what that means as far as green open space between villages, when right next door in the Gillies Meadow development, which is only literally being finished as we speak, has been designed, and actually the applicant there came to DC and went, isn't it brilliant, it's going to be the edge of Basingstoke, I'm going to do rural fringe, I'm going to do all these great things, and then actually you end up tacking on another development in the next field. And there's just something about that which is a travesty.
Thank you. Ken?
I have to say this development would support the golf club, frankly, and the members have voted that this is what they think they should do with a part of the golf club that is not as well used and is a bit scrappy, if we're honest. I don't know if Councillor Jones has played that or ruined it himself. My view is that we lost Basingstoke Golf Club. It would be remiss of us not to financially support through whatever means we can, to have this provision. And you know, we are talking about many millions going into the golf club to support it. Now, they've done a lot of improvements. If you've walked the golf course recently, you will see that there is a great biodiversity net gain on it. The benefit of a golf club is that they keep large areas as wildflowers, separation, plenty of trees, and genuinely, it comes off the 340, which is, as we all know, the corridor of employment. Jobs at the hospital and jobs at AWE are the full stops of the 340, and we are lucky that it is a road that is not like the A33 at capacity. So although it isn't perfect, no building on greenfields is, I genuinely think this is an attempt to use a corridor that we can, and the jobs at AWE and of course the hospital, which may well move or be reevaluated as a site for improvement, I think is what I see. And the reality is that the golf club is secure, and the benefits of biodiversity and securing of a leisure facility are quite useful. And the number of homes, yes, it's 220. But if we're kicking them out somewhere else, we've got to be prepared to accept homes in some places within this borough.
Thank you. Simon, you want to come back on that, don't you?
I do, but let's be pragmatic, Gary. Let's also be realistic. It goes to Ken's other point, doesn't it, as far as Plan B sites. You know, this is a site where the developer's having detailed conversations right now about what that application looks like. And I think that's one of the concerns for me, because actually we can sit here and say it's 200 odd units, that's quite helpful, bag it, put it, you know, move forwards. Well, actually, there's also a scary reality that 200 isn't available to us because there might be a planning application that's approved. So it just reiterates that Plan B point.
So that's going to be noted.
And the additional point is, how serious are we on the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty?
Yep, does say it there. Point noted. Thank you. Any more on that one? No, all good. Page 165, Skates Lane.
Well, you wouldn't expect me not to have my hand up first. You heard the comments of my residents and comments of my fellow councillor Andrew Johnson, who's not allowed to come even as a reserve today because she spoke at the meeting, about the concerns that are being raised here. This paper was obviously produced 14 months ago, and this was the first that we knew that Skates Lane was suddenly going to be thrown into the pot for a development. It's taken us 14 months to get round to speaking about it and more. And in the meantime, there's more and more reasons come forward as to why this isn't a suitable piece of land in the first place to be allocated, and why, in my opinion, it needs to be removed immediately. And it's not just my opinion, it's also the opinion of many other experts in the field, such as the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust, Natural England, even our own officers are now questioning whether or not this site actually has more things against it than for it in the heritage, more things on biodiversity, more things are coming out of the woodwork and things that may not be allowable to be built on anyway, and evidence is coming forward. Now, what I would say to you, this isn't NIMBYism. This isn't people in Tadley who don't want homes, because they do, but they're not allowed to have any in Tadley. Tadley is full, and unlike Ken, the believes the A340 is definitely at full capacity, certainly through Tadley. You can't get across the road on some times of the day, or even in the middle of the day, for 6 or 7 minutes. And the speed of traffic coming into Tadley, where the entrance is absolutely phenomenal. And Parish Council in Pamber have actually done some speed watch and have got reports on the amount of speed that people are coming in and out. It's supposed to be 40-mile-an-hour limit entering Tadley. They are 120 was the most that one vehicle was obviously travelling, presumably a motorbike maybe. So the road itself is not suitable for capacity for more people. The road will get blocked, and the health and well-being and the safety, if AWE has an incident, and the AWE doesn't just mean a nuclear incident, it means an incident such as the fire we had a few years ago. On that day, I tried to get to Reading to work. The whole of Tadley came to gridlock. Nobody could tell anybody which way to go instead. And the policeman I nearly ran into in the road, I asked him which way I could go. He hadn't got the foggiest idea, because obviously everything has to be done at last minute. So if we come to full stop because of a fire in Tadley, and there's more and more houses, how are things going to happen? How are people going to get ambulances through? There's nowhere else to go. We've got one main route. We don't have a railway station. We do have a decent bus service as long as it runs. Some days it has a few problems. But we are basically dependent on the car. And people travel to different places, Newbury, Reading, no public transport, they have to get in cars. This site is going to be quite a distance away from the main road, so people will not cycle and then come onto the A340 because they don't feel safe on it now. And in fact, they can't even walk up the hill from Skates Lane up to the school, the nearest school at the Green, because there is one pavement on one side of the road, and it is so narrow that you can hardly get a pushchair up it, never mind a wheelchair. And the traffic on that corner goes past you at rates of knots, and you nearly get knocked into the hedge by big multi-vehicles. So it is not a suitable site for those reasons. And then you've got the problem with the Portway, the Roman Road. The Roman Road has proved to be a historic site. At the entrance, there are apparently banks that Andrew mentioned when she mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting in early September. That is historic, and now it's been recognised that it's in line with the same one that was at Park Pruitt, which was kept because when Park Pruitt was developed, because it is unique to this part of the world and Silchester. And we don't know what else is there because, of course, Silchester and other places were joined by the Portway, which goes right through the middle of the site. So I haven't even got on to the biodiversity, but we've already got loads of reasons why it shouldn't be built on. The DPZ currently stops building in Tadley. Tadley is full, as I said before, and we have a fine example of how not to build a settlement without the infrastructure. Tadley has got very little infrastructure, despite the fact it serves 25,000 people. And over the years, since the 1950s, it's grown from 250 to the many houses we've now got. And you're looking at Borgeth and Pamba, added up, many thousands of houses. We've got a swimming pool. It was built and opened in 1998. We've got a new football ground. That was actually built in West Berkshire because we can't build anything in Tadley. And since 2008, when that was opened, there has been absolutely nothing added to Tadley at all. So what little has come along, fortunately, but again, that's in West Berkshire. So we have not got the infrastructure, we haven't got the doctor's surgeries, and we haven't got many of the things that are needed. Infrastructure and the water companies and sewage and everything else is all based on the 1950s when it was built by AWE building, and people are still living in those houses and they still have problem with sewage. So where is the capacity for adding an extra 260 houses at the edges of Tadley into Pamba, partly Tadley? The DPZ will no doubt have to be moved because those people will still have an effect on any evacuation plans if we have to evacuate AWE. And unfortunately, things like plumes of smoke don't recognise that there's a little piece of line on a map because it will go wherever it needs to go, depending on the prevailing wind. In addition, we've got all this about the diversity and the lack of knowledge about what was there. I don't believe that Bewley Homes, who I've been to speak to on several occasions, and I've been to 7 presentations, and who are presented to the public, actually understand the strength of feeling in the town about the lack of knowledge about what is on that site, about the number of footpaths that have been mislabelled, about the types of animals and flowers and fauna that are on that site and are shown between a triple SI of Tadley Common, Silchester Common. We've got Pamba Forest, and it joins in with the triple SI, which is Ron Ward's Meadow, which is right adjacent, and 2 sinks. And never mind the fact that this is a wildlife corridor that will join the 2 parts and should be designated as such. And that is something that we've been talking about. I believe that all these reasons mean that this site is undeliverable. Never mind the site that there might be challenges on ownership of the land and what can it be used for, whether or not the road can be turned into a road or not, because the Hampshire County Council's passed decisions. There are loads and loads of reasons why this is not a suitable site for housing. And so I would like you to think about, and I would certainly propose that we do remove it. Finally, I would just like to say a few words. The guy at the River Trust that we spoke about the other day was very adamant that obviously people need to think about rivers. And I know that we all need to think about diversity. We've actually passed an ecological emergency, and that we want to make sure that we're going to protect the wildlife that we've got. Once it's gone, it's gone. It can't come back, and it won't ever be here. And we need to protect this for our future. I shouldn't be here today. I should be in Taunton, because when I heard the River Trust people speaking on Saturday, I got a text on my phone which said that my best friend from school had just died and that the funeral was going to be today in Taunton. I should be in Taunton, but I chose to listen to it online because she believed that we all should do what we can while we're here, because once we've gone, we've gone. So I'm here because she would have wanted me to be here. She was a biology teacher. She studied biology with me at grammar school. We all believed in nature, and despite what some people say, that is exactly what I have done all my life and why I am speaking so passionately about this today. Because quite honestly, we need houses, yes, but they need to be the right houses in the right place. And this is the wrong place, unfortunately. And because we've had no building in Tadley, other places have had to suffer the ignominy of our extra homes. And because we haven't built many down, which I was leader of the Lib Dems when we purchased it or made options with the county council so that we didn't have to build in villages and make everybody's life a problem. but we have not built it. And so we must not do the same again and destroy whatever advantages that we've got for our people.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your passionate comments, and I'm sure the portfolio holder and officers have made notes of those. Nick first.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, well, we've heard a lot. Thank you, Joe. I know where this site is. I don't know the ground itself. So, you forgive me for having a slightly different perspective on it. One of the I have had a lot of emails about this site over the last few months as well. And one of the things, one of the reasons people said, we don't want it, it's outside the settlement policy boundary. And yeah, sure it is. I don't doubt them. But what is the settlement policy boundary? It's a line that somebody drew on a map round the settlement. So if we're going to build anything like the number of houses we need to build across this borough, we are going to have to move outside settlement policy boundaries, and that applies whether we're in Tadley or Sherfield-on-Loddon or Popham. It doesn't matter. It's a line we put on the map. It's basically now out of date, so we've got to move away from that in some cases. What's good about this site? It's on the A340, and I drive that road twice a week because I swim at Tadley twice a week. And it is a busy road, and I turn right onto it at Queen's College Arms, and that's not a good junction, anybody who knows it. But believe me, it is not carrying anywhere near the traffic that the A33 is. And that's not just because I live in Sherfield on the A33. I'm sure if a road survey was done, I'd be backed up. Secondary schools in Tadley. I know there is spare. I don't know the primary school, so I can't comment on those. But certainly, I know the Hurst has got spare capacity because probably 90% of the fallout from Bramley School finishes up at the Hurst. And the reason for that, as Joe said, is because there hasn't been a lot of development in Bramley. You don't tend to get the younger families, which means you don't tend to get the younger children there. Communities age, and they age with the age of the development. So the secondary school, I know, has got capacity. Buses, we all know that is one of the best bus routes and most frequent bus routes in Basingstoke. Local facilities, yeah, there's a good variety of local facilities. There is the sports centre, which is, as you've said, it's getting quite old. It could do with being updated. It could do with more facilities, but it is there, and that's a lot more than a lot of the other sites that we've looked at tonight have got. Certainly, at least there's something there. One of Tadley's problems, as Joe said, it hasn't had any investment in it in probably 20 or 30 years. I think it's probably 30 years since it was a significant development in in Tadley. So a development of a few 200-300 houses would bring some development gain. It would bring some 106 money, which could be spent in Tadley to the benefit of all the people who live there. You touched on wildlife. I don't know the biodiversity of that site. As I say, I know where it is. I don't know the ground itself. Is it much different? Is it that much more special than any of the other sites that we've looked at? I know Popham Airfield fairly well, and leaving out the really great length of concrete that runs down the middle of it for landing aeroplanes on it, there's a lot of biodiversity around there. There's woodland, there's marshland, there's all sorts of things. I'm not sure that this piece of ground has got biodiversity, anything more special in terms of biodiversity than a lot of the other sites we're looking at. One of the things Joe did say was about walking into Tadley. And as I say, I drive there quite regularly. I know that length of pavement, and yes, you're absolutely right. Is there the possibility, looking at the map, going through the church conservation area, of getting some sort of a secondary access, a cycleway, you know, a shared footpath cycleway through there? Could that be done? And the other thing, which I'm sorry, Joe, I really can't agree with you. You mentioned a one-off incident in Tadley where there was a fire and people didn't know where to go. If we don't build houses because of a one-off incident, we're not going to build houses anywhere, because there's a one-off incident on the A33 every week. You know, you're always going to have a one-off incident somewhere that gridlocks the place. So the site obviously needs a huge amount of work, but from where I'm looking at what I know of the site, and I say I don't know the ground itself, to me it looks like a very deliverable site. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for those comments. Ken?
Thank you, and I accept Joe's passion on this, but Tadley is our second biggest conurbation, and as she has said, it's had almost no development over 20 years, or more than that, because I've lived in Ashford Hill for more than 20 years. The last big site, Boundary Hall, I was on the DC committee that approved that. You know, we have not, Tadley has not had overdevelopment, unlike places like Bramley or many other bits of Simon's Ward, Oak Ridge. Many of them have all had things. I know that the Hurst has not got a full capacity of children in it. It has an ageing population, so it's hardly surprising, is it, that we've not developed there, that young families have not brought up their children. I know that people pass through my village of Ashford Hill who are Tadleyites, but they've moved to Andover, and they come through Kingsclere, Whitchurch on the way to work. I think it is right that we give them the opportunity to have a home of their own next to their families or parents, so as they get that community support. I agree. There are bits of Tadley that could do with it, and I'm sure, Joe, if we asked nicely to the new administration, maybe we could have the leisure centre, the swimming pool, upgraded. It would be good for Tadley, and that generates that stay within your own area. I think it is massively important that we do protect the heritage sites that are on this proposal, and I think that can be done. We have got a fantastic conservation officer now, somebody who takes the job seriously. Finally, it's outside the DEPZ. Let's be honest about it. That has been a sticking point for any development in Tadley. But this site sits outside it, and therefore you're not going to go back towards the AWE site if there's an emergency. You're going to drive up the 340 away from it, which is fairly easy. We've seen that we've got a great bus service, and I obviously used it when I was banned from driving. So I know how good it is and how late it works and how early in the morning it gets you to Basingstoke. So I think this is a opportunity to take Tadley out of the aspic it's been in for too long, and deliver a site for people who genuinely want to live within the town that they were born in and perhaps have a job in. So I like it.
Thank you. Colin, sorry.
I'll answer to anything.
I'm going to call you councillor, but
I'm supporting of Councillor Slimming, really. Throughout this piece, we've got this minimum 10% biodiversity net gain throughout this piece. But in this particular case, I've got people opposite saying they don't know the site. Well, I'm sorry, but if you don't know the site, why are you commenting? But there are very protected species on this site. And if we're serious about our wildlife and all that, I mean, that's one of the reasons. People move to Andover because it's cheaper than anywhere else. And the last point is, education is not controlled by the Borough Council, it's controlled by the Conservative County Council, when they should be providing the places for our school children.
Thank you. We've got differing opinions from the committee. I don't really want to continue this back and forth across the table now, because you've made your point and the other side have made their points. Really, it's just you did have, if you were brief.
Yeah, I will be brief. Yes, you're right. I've not complained that the schools are full, because they're not, except the one that I'm chair of governors at, which is the fullest school in the town, and obviously is collaborating with, in the same collaboration with Bramley. So I'll be talking to them tomorrow. So yes, we haven't got the children in the town, but then that's because of the population in general across the country. The numbers have fallen anyway. You talked about cycleways. The cycleway that is proposed by Bewley Homes is across land that nobody is going to sell to them, so that's not a possibility. So some of the things that they're proposing aren't deliverable either. And I think that the site itself, if you actually look at the screening, the screening that went on the website, normally nobody responds to it at all, because it's just whether you need to have EIA screening or not. When we had the meeting in early September, there were 102 people that had commented on it, including the statutory consultees, about why it should be at least go for screening. And I think if the screening happened, and I don't know that we've actually seen the report yet about what the outcome of the screening is, the screening itself should show you that this land is much more valuable than you're suggesting it is. And I would hope that with respect that you do have a look at the website and look at the experts that are commenting on, not just myself, but my residents and the expertise that is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Kate?
Just very briefly, Chair, I am hearing the need for some new dwellings in the Tadley area, but I do have real reservations about this site. There are the two sinks, the ancient woodland, nearby SSI and protected species. It's all adding up for me to be a somewhat problematic site. Thank you.
For those comments, so I want to finish that particular site and move on. I'm sure Andy's taken the different views of the committee on, and we see what happens going forward. So we could move to the next site, on page 171, Redlands Lodge. Nick again. Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to surprise you all. If you actually look at the map of this site and collate it with the maps of the Redlands site that is being built now and the land east of Basingstoke site, this is a little island would sit in the middle of those two sites, and it's 16 houses. So if land east of Basingstoke goes ahead, Redlands is already being built. It would be idiotic not to build this site. It would just be absolute stupidity. There's a building on there, it's thatched. An awful lot of people think it's a special building, it's 300-400 years old. It isn't. The parish council recently applied to English Heritage or whoever, Historic England, to get it listed, and they said, go away, it's not what you think it is. So if land east of Basingstoke goes ahead, to say this one might as well go ahead. It's a tiny little island site. If the others are happening, it's so little extra. It would just be absolutely idiotic. No, we'd lose it at appeal. Absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments on that site? No? All good? So next one is page 174, land adjacent to Waybrook Golf Club. Simon?
I'm not going to repeat myself, Chair. Thank you, Gary. But only to say, I think it's really important. It's one of those technicalities, isn't it, that sites come up as different sites, but it's absolutely right that they're seen together, Waybrook Golf Club and this one.
Thank you. Any more comments? No? So the next one, 178 Southern Road. No, we're all good. Next one, 181 New Road. No, we're all good. Next one, page 184, land south of Great Western Cottages. No, oh, Nick, sorry.
Yeah, could somebody locate that in my mind for me, please? I can't get my head around quite where that is.
Pub was one. Behind the train station, yeah. 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 Any more? No. All right, let's move on then. Thank you. Page 187, land off Ashwood Way. No, all good. Page 190, Oak Down Farm. Any starters? Simon?
I'm just conscious that Andy wasn't here because he seemed to be on a train. People keep telling me. Actually, I just raised a point, Andy. That's a point of clarity, really. That and it also goes to Joe's point about these were draft site assessments that were created sort of March, springtime last year, and a lot of water has passed under the bridge since then, hasn't it? We've had lots of applications for Oak Down. We've had lots of discussions, meetings. Appeals put in, appeals withdrawn, lots of ability for the public to have their say. The co-leader, Gavin, went to Maria's community chat on Tuesday, and he stated very publicly and had the point clarified that actually this administration would not allocate any new warehousing sites in the local plan update that was going to Reg 18. And of course, that was almost met with applause and a standing ovation, because you can imagine the people from Dummer and the campaign groups and the parish councils on that part of town who were in attendance. So there is just something here that I suppose it's just that having that conversation, and I absolutely understand when the documents were drafted about having that conversation very publicly in a publicly recorded meeting where we turn around and say a lot of water has passed under the bridge. And actually, I think everybody in this council is now very clear about people's position on Oak Down, and I think we just have to make sure that that gets stated really publicly, and everybody was very supportive of what Gavin said on Tuesday as far as not allocating future warehousing sites on any site, and of course the bit that you missed was, of course, that conversation was created in Many Down South, because of course we've got B8 warehousing in Many Down South, in Oak Down, and in Popham. So there was just something about making sure that that point was made very publicly, and I support that as far as what Gavin said on Tuesday.
Thank you. Andy?
Thank you for that, Simon. I obviously wasn't there at the meeting and haven't seen the recording of it, so I don't know exactly what Gavin said. Obviously, the Oak Down Farm is in this draft allocation which we're discussing this evening. There is a need, whether we see it as councillors or not, according to the economic needs assessment that was undertaken, that says we have a shortage of industrial and logistics space here in Basingstoke. I think, certainly having sat on DC myself and been party to some of the discussions that have been had, I'm not sure we would all agree as councillors that that's the case, but nonetheless, that's what the experts have come back and told us. So we need to try and square that circle, I certainly note the point you've made, Simon, and I think that needs further investigation from us to find out exactly what we're going to do with that.
Thank you. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. Oak Down Farm has been the bane of my life, actually. We sat on it in DC, we approved it. It then had to be redone because the information we were unfortunately given by one of the officers turned out to be incorrect, and under a threat of a judicial review, we resat it, and in the light of the new information, we refused it. It went to appeal. No, they said they were going to go to appeal, but then they resubmitted it in a slightly different form, which we then refused that as well. It went to appeal, and it was refused at appeal. But you can absolutely guarantee that the company behind it have sat down with that 200-page appeal report, and they will have gone through it line by line, sentence by sentence, and their next application will comply with that appeal report to the letter. So for us to then refuse it at DC would be absolutely madness, because we would leave the council absolutely wide open to the appeal and all the costs for unreasonable behaviour. So to actually not put it in the local plan when we know we're going to have to approve it at DC when the application comes in, and we all know it's going to come in. I was away, but there was a pre-app meeting on it within the last fortnight. So it's going to happen. So it might as well be in the local plan.
Thank you. Colin?
It's just an economic point about it, really. It's just a case that if we are going to approve these warehouse plans, these people that work there aren't the best paid workers in the economy, and we've still got housing. So there's a knock-on effect whichever way you go.
Simon?
I was just going to reiterate the point, because Andy's here, which is actually there is something which is incredibly sad, isn't it? That says absolutely there's been this history on Oakdown, but we've also got a suggestion in these documents that we allocate B8, the other side of the A30, and just down the road as far as Popham's concerned.
Thank you. Any more on Oakdown? No? So that's all the site allocations done. Colin, you wanted to say something?
I have, Chair. If you could indulge me, that we've got a site where we want houses.
Yeah.
And if you can and it's for the portfolio holder to listen. Sure. And it was a comment. It's a comment that was made by Councillor Isaac at the last meeting where I was an observer, and it's. I'll just read this out really. The recently vacated Portals paper mill site offers one of the prime brownfield sites in the whole borough. There's an increasing groundswell of community support, 84% at a recent Overton Parish Council exhibition, for the site to be included in the emerging local plan, as opposed to greenfield sites proposed in the Sheila. My fellow ward councillors and I support our residents in this site being included in the emerging local plan. This is a large plot of land adjacent to a railway station. Indications are that the landowners and or developers will wish to maximise the potential of this site with 340 to 360 dwellings muted. This is well over and above Overton's suggested allocation of 260, which begs the question for you, Andy, will any of Overton's surplus allocation count towards numbers elsewhere, specifically Whitchurch, and how do we achieve that?
Thank you, Colin, for that very interesting and good information, I would say.
Yes, thank you very much, Colin, and residents of Overton for that. We will certainly look into it, and I think the answer to your question will come out of the further research we look into it. But yes, I can genuinely say it's refreshing to hear a suggestion for a site being added to the site allocation rather than removed. So very grateful for that.
Thank you. Ken, you wanted to make one point?
Yes, if I could bring everybody back to page 26, which is, it lists our settlements. If I could wait till you've all got to the page first, that'd be really great. I have some issues that we have zeros for settlements up to 2040. Now, I can understand why we've done it in some ways, but I'll just take my own ward. Headley has 10 there, and frankly, that isn't enough. I'll be blunt with you. We have another part of the parish called Ashford Hill, which is under threat from 81 houses currently on appeal in 2 different sites. Headley can take more housing because it's got a bus service, it's got a shop, you can walk to work at Greenham Common. I really don't like some of these low numbers, and it would protect other bits of the parish if we get a more substantive number. I'm not talking about hundreds, I'm talking about 30. But I do think we need to be aware of the fact that otherwise, if we don't get this plan through properly, then planning by appeal, which I am suffering currently, is going to happen. So places such as, and I'll be really honest with you, Bramley, it ought to have a number up to 2040. Even if that number is only 15 or 20 or 30, it should have a number, because it doesn't protect it in the event of a neighbourhood plan being updated and no allocation to that site. Burclair, a place where we've just talked about schools with Joe and Nick. It's got, I think, four schools. We were in a meeting the other day where a neighbourhood plan scheme went through, but they were banging on about the facilities they have. Why can't we get something like 30 in there? These are the things that we can do to revive and empower rural communities. We can't leave them where the price of housing in some of these communities is so high that local people cannot buy them. It's not right and it's not fair that we do that. I implore you to review that settlement number. Kingsclere, should there be another 50 on top of the number that you've put, because we didn't deliver anything through our neighbourhood plan or during the local plan period. So I'm just making these points that I'm not some NIMBY. I'm quite happy to have some housing if it's the right housing and it's appropriate for what is required. So I would ask you to review all of those figures, and if there's a reason that it's in there, then that's fine. But we know from our discussion with Councillor Slimming, Taffy's not going to get 900, even if, of course, it's not going to happen. I am aware of that, and you're aware of that. So we need some of these other numbers to be filled in from somewhere else. So I implore you to get some decent numbers in there. Bishop's Green, well, it had 42 were approved at DC, but they wanted the 15 that was already allocated. Well, why don't we stick the 15 back in and protect them? Our job is to protect rural communities by seeing what is right and appropriate for them. And I genuinely believe things with nothing in them don't work, and things that are too low or too high, as in Tadley's case, are ridiculous. So we need to make sure that that page and that allocation is correct, so as we do the right thing for the settlements we wish to protect. And I genuinely believe it will be better for the communities that we are looking at in terms of their development and who lives there. But yes, this is your chance.
Thank you, Ken, for those comments, and I'm sure portfolio holder would take those on board. Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, just touching on those low numbers, I don't follow this committee much, so I may be wrong, but when you've got low numbers, you don't get no social housing. And at the end of the day, I've sat around this table, God knows how many years, and I've heard it all from the villages. We've lost our post office, lost our shop, no one buys anything. Well, young people can't afford to live in these places. We should have social houses in there as part of it. So the numbers need to match where we can get social housing, in my view, or we change the policy.
Thank you. Yep, we need to look at the social need of these areas, don't we? So yes. So is any more? So I'm going to, Nick, are you going to come in with a late volley?
Yeah, but it's just a very quick one, and going down a completely different track from anywhere we've gone. When these sites promoted, whether we would put them in, I'm not talking about, is where do they go from there? and why do they take so long to deliver? And what I'd really like to know, and I think this is probably Joe's area, how many of these sites are at landowner stage, how many are at a promoter stage, and how many are at a developer stage? Because there is a huge difference in the delivery time depending where they are. Promoters, as far as I'm concerned, are the devil's work. They really are. Because we allocate a site, it then goes to a promoter. The promoter has then got to move that on to a developer. That has just delayed that site by 1 to 2 years. So I would like to see this somehow going from landowner straight to developer. Whoever that developer is, if you can take the promoters out of the equation, you have just taken a massive chunk of delay out of the equation. And that will make a huge difference to our delivery times, and delivery times are the absolute key to getting this whole thing to work the way it should be. Which sites we deliver, which sites we say we keep in, which sites we put out is one thing. But the other side of it is what we do with, how we deal with those sites once we've decided we're going ahead with this. We need to know. Landowner, long time, particularly if you're going through a promoter. If you've got an actual developer on site, on board, then you can deliver that site relatively quickly.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to answer that, Joe, or look forward, have something in the future detailing those.
Yeah, I mean, I
items.
can let you have some information on that. I mean, that is something that we take into account when we do the site assessment. That is one of the criteria, how deliverable these sites are. As Councillor Konechko said, that's part of the reason for the stepped approach as well, because it's recognising that fact with some sites they won't be quick. But yeah, I can let you have that information. So
Thank you very much then. So that's end of the meeting then. I'll thank you all very much for attending and safe journey home. Thank you.